Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
We must continue to go further and faster in driving economic growth to make working people better off. That is why yesterday the Prime Minister launched our AI Opportunities Action Plan to throw the full weight of government behind artificial intelligence in the UK, revolutionising our public services and making our economy more productive.
Never mind the markets, let's talk about growth. That was the message from Rachel Reeves as she faced MPs yesterday. Today, we're asking the man with the plan, Science and Technology Secretary Peter Kyle, how he plans to deliver. You're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Tom Mackenzie. Welcome to the programme.
Tom Mackenzie, nice to have you with us. A special guest star today. You are our Mr. Technology on Bloomberg Radio and TV, so no better man to be with us for this conversation about AI and about growth. Roughly how much of your time do you spend thinking about AI?
I mean, increasingly, and of course this week it was an additional focus. I'm trying to outsource a lot of that to Perplexity and to AI itself, and hopefully that efficiency will come through.
Can confirm you are.
But look, it evolves so quickly, so rapidly. On a day-to-day basis, there are new evolutions in this space. So keeping across all of it is well, frankly, impossible to keep across all of it. So outsourcing some of that to AI itself is helpful.
Yeah, it certainly is. And look, we know that the government, as we've just been hearing, thinks that this AI strategy is going to be a key part of driving growth in the UK as well. And I think after the week that we've seen on the markets, that sharp jump in UK government borrowing costs over fears about the fiscal plans, worries about the needs for more cuts or tax hikes to come, we did have a little bit of respite for the Chancellor today. The inflation figures for the month of December slowed a little, coming in at 2.5%, which was slightly less than had been expected. Borrowing costs have come down a bit on that news as well. Although that's good, it doesn't necessarily solve the bigger dilemma of how to grow the economy. And we've heard some of the game plan for AI, which is a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's a big plan. These are 50 points, approximately 50 points that have been approved or are being worked on by the government. It includes everything from data centres, which we know are so important to underpin the build around AI. It talks about compute, so the AI accelerator chips that the government needs to get hold of, but also talent, so attracting that talent, special zones as well, investment zones. I think one question, or a number of questions come from maybe those raising a question mark over the plan, are how deep does this go? So you talk about energy. What is the process to resolve the question marks, the shortages in terms of energy needed? How do we get more talent specifically to help build out this AI revolution that the UK hopes it's setting out on? And how do we actually build the infrastructure, and in what time frame to get these data centres up and running? Just some of the questions. It's a big plan. Some would say there are a few more details that need to be fleshed out.
Okay, you've got questions. Let's get some answers. We've got Peter Kyle, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology with us. Great to have you on the programme. I wanted to start with sort of citing us where we are in this conversation as well. It's not been a great start to the year for the economy. We've had a tantrum on the bond markets. Looks like there's going to need to be spending cuts or maybe even tax rises in the coming weeks. The City Minister has resigned. Behind the scenes, is this a government in crisis?
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm a bit shocked to hear that I'm not the star of the show and Tom is, but I'll see whether I can upstage him during this conversation. When it comes to the economy, we're still living the history of our legacy. When you win an election, you don't just go back to zero and then start building. You actually have to deal with the circumstances that you inherited from the predecessors. And I think everybody would agree that we inherited an economy with some very deep structural problems. Underinvestment, low productivity, low growth, and very high taxation. And we have had to find a way through that. Now, what the budget did do was unlock investment. It found a way to unlock the investment in the high growth sectors and the sectors of the future. Now, I don't think I can think of a single business that has turned around from a position of failure without investing in innovation and innovating its way out of the challenges it has. And the country is the same. So the Chancellor has uplifted our government's R&D spend by 8.5%. It shows boldness, but it also shows a smart sense and understanding of how you move a country forward. You can't do all of that in a couple of weeks. The AI Opportunities Action Plan is one of those other key areas that we have found a way to unlock private investment, but also use very smartly the policies, the regulation, the planning, and other tools that we have as a government. So we are making those crucial first steps, and it will have an impact on the growth of the economy going forward.
When will growth get the boost that you say is coming?
Well, when it comes to private investment being unlocked by this government, just look that since we came into office in July, there has been £24 billion worth of private investment into our digital infrastructure. Just this week alone, on the back and the launch of the AI Opportunities Plan, we saw an additional £14 billion worth of investment. So we are finding ways through packaging areas like the AI growth zones that Tom mentioned. These are areas of the country where we have excess energy supply, quick and ready access to and connection to the grid, and we have a planning authority willing to work with central government so we can expedite that investment. So we are finding ways to get money into the economy and growth into the economy via this agenda in the short term. But of course, the benefits that will come with AI once you get the infrastructure right will start percolating right the way through the economy and society in productivity, in innovation, in new industries, new businesses, jobs and wealth creation. We have to get the first steps right. We never promised that we could fix the challenges that our country faces in 6 months. We never made that promise. But what we have done, and I hope people can see, is start laying those foundations upon which the future success of our economy and its people can benefit.
In terms of, you talk about the private investment into the tech sector that we've seen in recent months. Indeed, that's been a trend over the last couple of years. On the public sector, to what extent will you be partnering? Can you put a pound number on that in terms of how you will be partnering with the private sector to support, specifically to support AI? How much are we putting aside in terms of the spend on things like compute?
Well, when it comes to compute, I inherited a really chaotic landscape with unfunded commitments to build our compute capacity. What I've done already and fully funded, fully costed, and now being implemented is expand the Isambard supercomputer down in Bristol. That is now being expanded by a third. The existing supercomputer in Edinburgh has now been extended for a year. That gives me space to now devise a strategy, which I've been working on for some time, which I will release in the spring, and at that point, I will announce how we will move forward with publicly funded sovereign compute. But we've also committed in the action plan to increase public compute by a factor of 20 in 5 years. Of course, that's going to be a combination of publicly funded compute, sometimes directly by government, if it is very specifically for research purposes that we want to make available for specific research purposes in the public sector, including higher education. But there is also partnerships in there, but there is also unlocking, as you said, that private investment too.
And I think you're looking at an AI cluster or GPU cluster of maybe 100,000, which for the context, Elon Musk's xAI has got 100,000. They're looking to double that to 200,000, just a single company in the US. Would you consider, Minister, subsidies when it comes to the purchase of GPUs? There are a number of executives, CEOs, founders who would certainly push for that, given the cost of compute here and how that is proving a headwind for the build-out of startups.
Yeah, but let's just make sure we're comparing the same thing here. You're talking about X and comparing it to the British government. What you're not doing is comparing the British government with the US government or any other government. So what we want to do is create the circumstances whereby companies like X and others can build out that scale of compute here in the UK. Why? Because we have access to the skills. We have universities with a long history of R&D, of scientific endeavour and scientific achievement. And we have a government that is assertively now coordinating from number 10 with our brand new sovereign AI unit reporting directly to the Prime Minister and myself. And we have an investment landscape that is good, but not great yet. And we are working on how we can unlock capital into the economy so that we can support innovation and those businesses that are upskilling in the digital landscape. So we are, doing all of this, but let's just not compare the wrong thing, because not all of this needs to be funded directly by government, but only government can unlock the criteria for which companies like X and Anthropic and OpenAI and Meta, Google and Microsoft can do. And all of those companies I've just mentioned, are actually interested in the UK, and the vast majority of them are building out here in the UK. They are not contracting and they are not standing still.
Yeah, no, I made that comparison just so that our audience would understand, for example, that our commitment around 100,000 GPUs or AI accelerators is equivalent to about 100,000 that xAI is building out. And therefore, maybe, you could make the argument there's a bit of a mismatch, that maybe our ambitions need to be bigger on that front. Subsidies then could be a tool when it comes to GPUs?
Our ambition is huge. You admitted, and I'm really grateful for you putting into the context the sheer scale of what we have committed to. And just so people know that this is not something that I am committing to and then looking the other way and not coming back to. I've set up a delivery unit in my own department here. So I, as Secretary of State, can have a very direct, hands-on, iterative relationship with how we are going to deliver on these 50 commitments. I know that the growth, the jobs, the satisfaction that citizens will have with their life in Britain going forward is based on us getting this agenda right. And I am absolutely determined to. And I have a Prime Minister, thankfully, who is breathing down my neck on the delivery of all these units. So look, when it comes to sort of subsidies and the like, let me just clarify, because I wasn't having a go at you about this. We need to get this compute into the UK, all forms of compute, all forms of data processing, because we have some of the best data, probably the best data sets in the world. And don't forget, I am harmonizing the data. I'm creating the National Data Library, because you can't have great AI unless you have great data. The welfare state could, when we use it safely, anonymously, and give every citizen the right to those protections when it comes to their own data. But when we use this collectively as a country, we have a resource that America doesn't have. And I'm not going to just package it up and sell it off to America and send it off to America. If they want access to this, they come here and use our data to benefit the British public first and foremost. So, we have huge advantages here, but I can't expect companies to come over and invest unless we have the infrastructure here to house it, and we have the environment and the skills there to do it. And this just his final point. When it comes to companies, that you're mentioning, the frontier companies and the big tech firms, there is no way on earth that Britain, as our state, in fact, that any other state in the world, except China and America, can actually do what they are doing. Amazon alone spends more on R&D in singular purposes, developing technology, than the British state does in entirety when it comes to R&D. So let's not sort of say that we can do what they do. What we have to do is find our real competitive areas where we can have an advantage, where we can be smart with public money, but super smart when it comes to legislation and regulation and incentives, which we can do as a state that a private company cannot do.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those potential incentives then. If we're talking about the AI growth zones and the sort of incentives that you might be offering to get companies in, tax relief, what are the incentives to try and get companies into those zones?
So I've now been to Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Seattle 3 times in the last year. And I've spoken to every company that we've mentioned in this conversation so far. Not one of them has ever asked for a tax break or a financial incentive to come to the UK. What they have asked for is quick connection to the grid, ample supply of renewable energy, because all of these companies have their own renewable targets as well as governments need doing so. And they're worried about the price of electricity. So all of these things are the priorities that they have identified. And when you look at the AI investment zones, we've announced one already in Culham in Oxfordshire. That is what packaged up. So rather than expecting the companies to, come to Britain, find somewhere you want to do. And then if you want to apply for planning, that's the point at which you find out it's going to take 15 years or 10 years to get a connection to the grid. That's just not how we should work in Britain. So what we've done is use the power of central government, my department, to identify and work with local areas where there is a swift connection to the grid, where there is already an excess of energy supply in that part of the country. And we have identified and will identify planning authorities, whether it be regional mayors, whether it be local authorities or metro mayors. And we will do a deal with them so that we will expedite, using the new powers that this government has, expedite the investment so it can be built swiftly without any unnecessary delays. So we're talking months, not years, before this stuff starts hitting our economy and benefiting the jobs of the area and all the cluster innovations and companies in these areas.
Minister, on the energy piece, going to have to see elevated energy costs even from here as we build out some of this infrastructure before those additional forms of energy are online.
We're going to have to be really smart in the short term and into the long term. So in the short term, the way we're being smart is by identifying, because it's not, we do have we're fine for energy for the country overall at the moment, but we are pinched. We know that the needs into the future are going to be challenging, but it's not evenly distributed, and this is a misconception I think people have. There are parts of the country where there is a very tight supply of energy. There are other parts of the country where there is an excess of supply. There are parts of the country, for example, where there's been deindustrialization or big energy intensive companies have left, and that's left the infrastructure in place for energy supply, but it's no longer required. So in the short term, we are identifying those parts of the country where very large scale data centers, compute capacity can go and be built out. Now, if you take Culham, for example, we're offering investors there a 100 megawatt supply now today, but with a plan to build it up to 500 megawatts in the foreseeable future. So that would take us 500 megawatts to right up there with the best in the world as it is at the moment. And we have a very expedited pathway towards it. Into the medium and long term, there is a separate set of challenges, and you've identified all of them, and all of them are things that we are actively exploring. Firstly is renewables, and secondly is into nuclear. But I've set up an AI Energy Council, co-chaired by Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, and myself, and on that council are representatives from across the AI sector to bring their voice and needs into the strategic planning of the energy of our infrastructure of the future.
Okay, a lot of government resources mobilised for this plan. Are you worried that spending cuts that we're expecting in the next couple of weeks are going to affect this and affect your department?
I can't talk to the future. What I can talk to is the present and the realities. And the reality is that everything in this plan is fully costed and fully funded and has been backed by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. Secondly, going into the first spending review, which was resulted and was announced at the budget, this department, my department, got an 8.5% uplift in our R&D budget, 6.5% uplift in our core R&D budget. So those things that are related to the future of our economy and our success as a country, we have a Chancellor that is absolutely rigorously focused on it. So yes, we are in financial constraints. We have a lot of challenges to fix in this country. I don't want to leave you with the impression that this is the Chancellor making these decisions and me arguing with her and coming away shaking my head or with my tail between my legs. I am part of that solution too. I am trying to unlock investment to find solutions to the challenges our country faces, but also be very mindful of the financial settlement we have. And I share that burden with the Chancellor. I don't let it all just rest with her.
Is the Chancellor looking at you and your department now as the kind of the elixir of growth? Because we're not seeing it, but maybe your proposals do end up pushing that growth going forward. I mean, is it how dependent are we on you getting this plan right? I guess to get growth in this country.
I am excited, not daunted by the fact that this department and our work and the action plan that just landed are going to be absolutely central to our country's success going forward. Yes, growth is our number one mission, but also opportunity for young people. That's going to require young people in classrooms using AI to unlock the potential that kids have, particularly those kids with neurological or barriers to learning. In the same classroom, kids with talent that need stretching and challenging. AI can provide a real set of tools for that. That's just one example. Then you go to our health system and you go to our broader economy. I realize that if I get the infrastructure right, then I get some of the other announcements I'll be making in the coming weeks, not months, but weeks, about citizen-facing technology and also how we're bringing this technology and harnessing it in government and the way we transact ourselves as a government. Then if we get these things right, then of course we can start unlocking the huge potential we have as a country. Now, government is pretty poor at delivering a lot of this stuff in the past. I think if you look at what we're capable of at the moment, it gets you some of the way. But if you look at it doesn't get you to where our potential as a country is. So my whole existence these days is beyond what government normally achieves. And it's in that space beyond that to where identifying and walking towards what our country can achieve. So I am excited by that. The Chancellor is entirely bought into it. And as you saw on Monday, the Prime Minister is really committed, very enthusiastic, and he is playing a personal role in driving this forward. I'll just say that
Okay.
you know stats better than I do, but if you look at, I believe, if you aggregate the tech stock valuations from 2010, it's increased by 400%. If you aggregate all remaining sectors in the same time, it's grown by 25%. Well, we are going to anchor the economy of the future in where the growth is of the future, so that we can make sure that everyone in our country benefits from the innovation, the jobs, and the wealth that flows from it.
Okay, but on that point, and we can hear your enthusiasm, and we can hear that you're a busy man and plenty of emails flooding in as you've been talking to us as well. But I want to ask you about the politics of this. I mean, the support for Labour has plunged since the election. We've seen, for example, a big rise in support for Reform UK, almost level in a recent YouGov poll. How do you bring the public with you on what is a very ambitious plan, but to a lot of people will sound like pie in the sky when they're dealing with issues around housing or the health service or the cost of living?
Well, we have to talk up to the electorate, not down to them, which is what we have been doing. We've been very honest with them about the scale of the challenge that we have as a country. The budget was a difficult budget because we had to do big, bold things, but the public knew that we have big, challenging issues facing our country, and business as usual is not going to do it. So we've inherited a situation where the previous government was managing decline. We have found a way to plug the gaps to get our public finances on a stable footing, but also to find money to invest, to transform. That's the one thing the previous government were not doing. So I understand why there are challenges, because we have inherited the challenges, and we are 6 months in. We're only 6-7 weeks on from the budget itself. And we now have to start implementing and explaining to the public why all of the big, bold measures we're making at the moment, which sound very new, because it is new. We're harnessing new technology. We are building new infrastructure, and explaining to the public that digital infrastructure is as important to our future as electricity and water and other infrastructure, which is why I've upgraded it to have the same value in terms of the way that we deal with it in law and government. Okay. So we will explain to the public, and then hopefully soon, we are doing everything we can to put money in people's pockets so they can start feeling the difference as this administration. Because at the moment, I accept that people aren't feeling the difference because we haven't had the chance to get the legislation through and get all of the budget measures through and have the investment come from the Treasury into the departments and then out there into the economy and society. But we are doing everything we can.
Okay, Peter Carroll, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, thank you very much for joining us. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe, give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen. Our audio engineer today was Sean Guastamakia.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo. I'm Tom Mackenzie.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.